You're listening to Climate Champions, a podcast from the Architects Journal. I'm Hattie Hartman, Sustainability Editor at the Architects Journal.
And I'm Hattie's co-host, Joe Jack Williams, a partner at Fielding Clegg Bradley Studios.
This is the fifth episode in this series focused on materials, timed with our materials book from RIBA Publishing. This episode is a slight departure because we're talking about building with waste, a topic we don't cover in the book. If you have other materials you'd like to hear about or guests you'd like to hear from, do get in touch. You can always email me, hattie.hartman@emap.com. In this episode, we are traveling to India. I urge you to look at the episode notes to see some images of what we're discussing.
When we look around our 5-mile radius, all we find is waste. So it is actually a fantastic place to start an architecture that really resounds to the global needs. We do not need to look at this as an obstacle. Let us look at it with the maximum optimism. And I never thought of this waste or mud limiting my ability. In fact, no. Very early on, I realized that both mud and waste are actually enhancing our architecture.
Our guest today is Indian architect Vinu Daniel, founder of Wallmakers, a small practice based in Kerala in South India. Vinu's recent TED Talk entitled The Beauty of Building with Mud and Trash captures the thrust of his work. Last year, Time magazine listed him among its 100 future leaders. In 2022, Wallmakers won the Royal Academy's Dorfman Award, which recognizes an architect who is reimagining the future of architecture. Vinu has close to 70,000 followers on Instagram. Born in the UAE, Vinu grew up in Dubai and returned to his parents' home in southern India to study architecture at the College of Engineering in Trivandrum. From there, he went on to work at the Auroville Earth Institute in Pondicherry and the UNDP's post-tsunami rebuilding of the neighboring state of Tamil Nadu. Vinu says that the crucial question for architects today is not what should we build, but should we build it all? This question is being asked here in the UK as well. Earlier this year, I visited southern India, but I couldn't figure out where Vinu's office was located. Then I understood he has no proper office, but establishes an impromptu site office wherever he is working. We didn't manage to meet in India. I believe you were departing to Saudi Arabia, so I'm delighted to meet you virtually today. I did visit your lovely St. George Orthodox Church, which you completed almost a decade ago in Cochin. It's a spectacular project, and I'll put an image in the episode notes. It's great to have you on the podcast. Vinu, you've said that you cannot unsee the mountains of waste that are piled everywhere, particularly on construction sites. You've built with plastic bottles, with tires, and recently with abandoned plastic toys. How did you get started building with waste?
It's nice to be on this podcast. Thank you for inviting me. First of all, I was not a regular fan of architecture to start off with. Going through architecture school was a difficult experience for me because it was talking about how tall and how big you should build. And me having once in a year occasion of seeing Kerala, the beautiful lush green tropical paradise Kerala, often found that it is being encroached with the same capitalistic concrete mindset that I wish to run away from Gulf. And architecture was being the main, broker for this particular showdown. And I didn't want to be part of it. Somewhere around fourth year, I decided to quit architecture because this was getting too much for me. I planned to quit. And just before quitting, there was a competition between students called Students Architecture. And some of my team members selected Laurie Baker's project. And Laurie Baker was known as the Gandhian of Indian architecture, or world architecture, Gandhi of architecture. I had a nice visit to him because he was very old by that time. But he gave a proper welcome and had a big chat with two nobodies, me and my classmate. And during that conversation was the first time I thought that architecture is important. Till that time, I thought, like, we are just showcasing our egos, more than building shelters for people. And even building shelter for people meant we will be exploiting all the minerals and all the resources from planet Earth. But Laurie Baker gave a different perspective. He actually met our father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi, during a boat trip. He was also a bit disillusioned about what he should do and how he should go forward. And Gandhi gave him this idea that if you can build with materials you find in a 5 mile radius, then you will reach Swaraj. And Laurie Baker kind of, like took on that idea, and it inspired many architects during his time. And for a young student like me who was planning to quit, these words were very precious, you can imagine. I went back thinking, how will I go forward? And my generation, when we look around our 5 mile radius, all we find is waste. We find a lot of waste. And India and some other underdeveloped countries, unfortunately, becomes the dump yard for many of the developed countries. So, adding to the already wasteful mindset of my people, we are also importing waste from other nations. We become the dump yard of the world. So it is actually a fantastic place to start with, was what I thought. If an architecture that really resounds to the global needs, it should start from India. And it being a follower of somebody like Laurie Baker or Supreme Mining, I could understand that this is the best place to start. And we do not need to look at this as an obstacle. We can look at it as the new way forward. We do not need to look at it in a pessimistic way. Let us look at it with the maximum optimism. And I never thought of this waste or mud limiting my ability. In fact, no. Very early on, I realized that both mud and waste are actually enhancing our architecture. And that is exactly what I intended to show for the last 2 decades.
I mean, it's fantastic. That locality is really important. I know you've spoken previously about the kind of Gandhi's message that the ideal home should really come from a local area, within 5 miles. How influential is that kind of 5 mile boundary? Is it a strict thing?
This is my 19th year of practice. And I never had the answers when I started off, to be honest. You should understand that this 2000s were a time when all the star architecture and all those things were happening, and everybody who could just jump onto an airplane and go to the Gulf region would do that. No, nobody would stay back in India. And me coming from that region, who had some roots in that region, was seen as an idiot, trying to and to be honest. Today, however, there are many talks that I'm giving, being very confident about how my philosophy is very strong and everything. Trust me, it didn't come in a day. So what initially happened is that two things happened at the same time. One is that I got this wonderful one-line philosophy from Laurie Baker, principle to base my architecture on. And the second thing is that I learned a bit of mud architecture from Supreme Mining at Oroville Earth Institute. And I found out that even though these are two coming from two different people who never even met, there is a lot of similarity in this. And being very aspirational at that point of time, you can imagine I simply wanted to do one building because it was even difficult for me to get a building. because I was very adamant in only pursuing earth architecture, raw mud architecture. I never got projects, even projects which I got. People would say, "Oh, this is mud break; it will fail and everything." A lot of engineers and a lot of people will comment. So I started losing a lot of projects even before they began. And in my haste to somehow build, I got sponsorship from a legendary singer who was, who gave some of his award money, a very minuscule amount of money. In today's terms, it is less than $2,000 to build a house for a cancer victim with the material in that vicinity. And I knew that to propagate this architecture, I needed to learn. I cannot be just the architect. I had to be the carpenter. I had to be the mason. I had to be the rock lifter or a cement mixer or whatever it is. I had to be everything because this is completely new. And thankfully, Orwell Essential was a place where you could learn all those things. And I had a good camaraderie with the workers of that particular place. And few of them joined me in my venture. Even now, they are with me. So I had to be the one person who does these things and influence local people. And we influence local people. But sure enough, the budget just ran out while I was building the last phase of it. And the sponsor being a legendary singer and a lot of publicity was associated with it. And time frame was also necessary. And I didn't have money to put the glass on. I had the idea of putting glass after doing the mud vault and everything. I had to rethink because I simply didn't have budget. And looking on the ground and looking at my surroundings, I saw a lot of waste beer bottles. And I have some masons who are free. So this was when I kind of thought, maybe I should start thinking out of the box, utilize whatever I have. I simply didn't have any more money to invest in glass, the typical glass paints which we use for our windows. And it was necessity that actually brought me to waste. To be honest, it was not the original philosophy. But once I started doing it, I saw that these materials are not only just saving the money part, but I cleared out that entire area in search of beer bottles. There were a lot of heaps of beer bottles in that particular vicinity. And this place looked clean, and some of the neighbors actually commented, "Thank you. We also have some waste. Can you utilize this?" Suddenly I became the waste picker in this particular area. It was not an insult to me. I was at the lowest point of my career, and some recognition in that form and then understanding that, okay, I have unearthed something. And maybe this is not the wrong way this is the right way. At that time, when I started it, I was thinking, okay, because this time I didn't have budget, maybe I will use beer bottles, but the next time I will find more budget and I will do a better thing. But then I recognize that a new beauty has arisen from this particular thing, something which I had not planned.
It's amazing.
So it took a complete turnaround for me that maybe the materials will help me design better. This is way back in 2006, and I was just starting my career. My initial hit itself, I had to utilize some waste materials because I had no other option. Then I started to think about it in a more convincing manner, and I started to think, why not? Why am I being orthodox or conventional about, like using these hi-fi materials? The end product, what I built, gave more beauty than I originally intended with the glass paints. So most of the things today you hear from talks and TED Talks and all is actually something which happened in a cumulative way.
Mhm.
It is not a philosophy that was, okay, this is the framework or it's all formed and I'm all set. No, it was not.
You're obviously facing a financial issue, and it's a really creative way to respond to it, and I think it's fantastic, the beauty that comes with it. Do you think the confidence of understanding how things are built? You said you worked with carpenters and you'd already done earth bricks and these kind of things. Do you think that helped you understand those opportunities that perhaps other architects wouldn't see?
Yes. But it also helped me understand a very important thing. I was very confident about construction because I had this thought that, okay, I'm a learned architect, I'm a good mason, am I a good carpenter? All those things, like actually fill my head with a lot of attitude and overconfidence, to be honest. But then I slowly started to realize that architecture is about, in some sense, understanding the site, the materials, and everything. And the architect is supposed to be more silent, listen to his materials, listen to his site. Because I was being too loud, if I can say in a metaphorical way. I thought that I am the master of these materials. I know these materials. But then years of working with these materials, you said, is there an added advantage of being a mason? Years of handling these materials. The more I handle, the more I realize, the less I know of it. So let's say mud brick, this is now 19 years before. I thought that, okay, I know how to do it. I made walls, I made domes, I made jollies. I'm good in doing this. I'm good in creating parametric forms when it was very difficult. Without any computer simulations and all, I could do my own XY equations and do parametric forms. I thought, like I'm good in this. But then further, when I worked with it, I understood that, okay, I am not exactly sure, because now I got a new way of doing it. And then again, that again happened, that, okay, I thought I had covered all chapters of this particular mud brick. What more is there? Then I'm finding a new chapter. And the more I'm finding, the more I understood that the less I know about this. This gave me a very good perspective of listening to the site. Being a listener became a very big aspect of my working scenario.
Because you're talking about the mud bricks and kind of mastering that technique, I have a question that's come up here in the UK and in some of the other conversations we've had with Anna Heringer. I don't know if you know her work. She does a lot of earth construction. And she is adamant that you can't add any cement into the mix, because then that impacts the circularity of the material and you can't dismantle it and return the materials to earth. What I've read is that you do add cement in some cases, or what's your view on this?
Yeah, I have a different view than Anna Heringer. Anna Heringer is a great influencer of our generation, because she's someone who has done some amazing buildings. And I know for sure that the unconventional mud architecture that is being practiced today is only on the fringes. It has to come to mainframe. So if it means using a bit of cement and coming into the mainframe, I am on for that. And trust me, nobody here is going to take even Anna Heringer's building if tomorrow it is going to be broken down into pieces and then again reuse. That is how you can use it. You cannot immediately crush it. Again, putting it through pulverizer means you are actually again engaging embodied energy processes. Let's say if tomorrow a Vinu Daniel building is broken down or Anna Heringer building is broken down, you will have to engage some pulverizer and all those things. And my building material will become fodder for the next building material. Even Anna Heringer's building material will become fodder for the next building material. After a few years, the compression becomes very strong. So any building which goes more than a decade becomes too compressed even without cement. And it is not fit for, again, agricultural purposes. Or if it is to be fit for that, then you will have to pulverize it. Our buildings are only a tiny portion of it, and agriculture doesn't need the waste of our buildings. What we probably need is new raw material for new buildings. So both mine and Anna Heringer's buildings can be repurposed for new buildings. So it is circular in that sense. So utilizing a bit of cement so that you can build, let's say, an apartment in here. I'm sitting in an apartment which is built with conventional materials. There are thousands of apartments even here in Bengaluru. And just yesterday, I convinced a few people to build an entire apartment with mud in Hyderabad, and they are okay for it. We need to enter the commercial construction, and if it means using a bit more of steel, a bit more of cement, than the purest form of mud architecture, I am open for it, because that makes a huge, bigger change, I believe. It is not good enough that there is a Vinu Daniel building at the end of it. I might make maximum 50 or 500 buildings. But is that enough? We need to inspire 5,000 architects to do this. The promise is to engage commercial architecture that is happening everywhere in the world, conventional construction that is happening everywhere.
So it would be very interesting to hear a little bit more about how you see the process of scaling this up and what kind of buildings are next on your horizon if you're going to be doing some apartment buildings.
Yeah, because why did we do it in the first place if we are not in trying to create a serious impact? Are we trying to create a nice art portfolio, a nice portfolio where we can talk on a nice podcast? No, the idea is to propagate, is to make sure that everybody understands the worthiness of these materials. So the scalability is everywhere. I am not just planning to do apartments. I would want to do airports. I would want to build cities. In fact, we are building a mini city in Saudi. So all those things is something which we want to do. We do not want to restrict ourselves with a particular niche or anything. Even with what I use, let's say that 5% cement which I utilize, I have found out that my building is 1/10 the embodied energy of an average building. Our building, we calculated it because we are a data-based architecture. We want to make sure everything today sustainability has lost counting the embodied energy. It's all some like some green washing that is happening out there. No, we want to make sure that every energy that we utilize, every kilo of carbon dioxide that we emit is noted. So in that sense, I can actually guarantee that this has probably some of the world's best embodied energy emissions. So everything you can see is literally collected from waste or mud and getting from the locality. None of the things which I do right now is of any impact if it is not propagated on a scaled up audience.
So with that in mind, I think just understanding a bit about the process and how that can be expanded. So when you start on a project, so obviously you've got brief and area requirements, but also materiality around you. How does that work in practice for you?
This is where I have a huge difference of opinion with the conventional architecture and the way it is practiced. Waste is around us. But if you sit in an office, you are not going to see it. If you sit in your wonderful drafting room, you cannot see the waste around you. If I found Hattie at the right time in Kerala, I would have taken her for a 5-minute walk and showed her the raw material to build 5 buildings.
Amazing.
That is where the architect has to be the person on the road, not in the office. You have to see your site. You have to see your surroundings. Open your eyes. Do not open your eyes to the contractor who is showing these new materials, or wait for some architect to show you something. Be out there. Today it is all laptop. That means you need a lab. You don't need a desktop. You don't need a desk for that. An architect is not a white collar job. It is about going to the site, thinking that this much amount of waste is there. Why am I not utilizing it? But for that, you have to be in the surroundings to see. Today, architects are not able to see. They are looking, but they are not able to see the waste lying around because we are simply oblivious to what is happening around us. This has to change. This architecture way of practice has to change.
So there's a lot of experimenting in what you do because you're pioneering a new way of working. How do you test? How do you ensure that the materials you're working with are going to work in a given context?
Again, I would say it is the lack of awareness amongst young architects. I'm not the first to use beer bottle. If I use tires, I'm not first to use it. Micro Reynolds, an American, has done it more than 40, 50 years ago. It's just that I am doing it in a new aesthetic, different way. The ferrocement shells that I'm using for my roofs is actually made by an engineer, an obscure engineer from Kerala, from my home state, who made it in 1960s. We just updated that technique. My new material is grass. And grass has been used in Indian roofs for more than a millennia. And yet today there is absolutely literally no one left to tell us which grass is good and which is bad. I have a blind guy, almost blind grandpa, who is the expert, and we are right now learning from him because we are building a bridge in Karjat in Mumbai where we are utilizing grass. And you wouldn't believe. So we are giving him two tuft of grass. And one he says will float in water, it is more water repellent, and the other one will sink in water. Our ancestors had the techniques for us to build all these massive cities. It's just that we conveniently choose to forget them.
I wanted to ask a little bit about the way you work. I think I saw a picture, a photo of your team, maybe 10 people. And then I read somewhere that you have 100, 150 people who work with you on different sites.
Around 200 people.
Describe a little bit how you work now.
So I am the repair guy. So my team is now run by my partner Oshin Varghese and few others. There are architects who are placed in different places, and I kind of go between site. But most of these people have been somewhere trained by us. And recently we did a Sharjah architecture triennale where like we couldn't bring our experienced masons. So my partner Oshin and another architect, associate architect Preksha Shah, they join hands to train local Pakistani workers. Some of them actually asked my partner Oshin that, do you know what I was doing before this? And Oshin said, okay, I think you were in construction. He said, no, I was a goat herder. I was herding goats 1 month ago,
Amazing.
and I just got into construction. So we were able to manage to build a massive dome out of tire and mud made by these literally no experienced Pakistani masons. You know why it is easily able to be done? Because these are all techniques that we had mastered over a millennia.
But if you scale this up to, say, an apartment building in Hyderabad or something, how is this process going to work?
Everything is modular in architecture. There is nothing that doesn't start with a single piece, with a single class. So an apartment might be 2 lakh bricks. And if you show how to lay the first brick, the rest of them will follow. Architects came only 50 years ago. What were we doing before that? We didn't build before that. So my ancestors would, or your ancestors would get the neighboring fellow to help build his own house. It was not built by so-called architects. So this is a process that has been complicated by many, I don't know, architecture professors unnecessarily, according to me. We all complicated this process so much that, like today, suddenly we need 5 experts in this field and talk a lot of nonsense.
One of the things I think you're doing is really kind of trying to reset the supply chain for construction. When you're brought on site, that you come with, it's Vinu, this is kind of what you're going to be doing. But obviously there's a whole supply chain that you've got to kind of educate. How do you navigate that dynamic?
One word, naivety. Initially, I was very naive about this. I didn't think that I am going to change the entire supply chain and everything. I thought this was all fun and, amazement and everything. I was like, oh, I discovered something magical, like everybody would accept it the day one, but it took 20 years to get here. So in some sense, I was dumb initially to understand the thing which I was doing. In some sense, I was happy doing it. To be honest, I wasn't thinking of the complexity. I wasn't thinking about the enormous responsibility that this held. No, I love doing this. I love to be taking that, like local material, suddenly finding that this is plausible. This is a good thing to do. I found joy in getting up in the morning and brushing my teeth and going out, taking a bath and going out. All those things made sense to me. For me, it is that I'm going to a new place and I'm not thinking, okay, like I'm disrupting the entire supply chain. That never inspires anybody, those kind of large responsibility. It's just that I'm just saying to my very sweet workers, like who has been with me. So I had this team who has stayed with me through all thick and thin. So I'm telling them, boys, we are not doing whatever we did so far. We are going to build this with grass. And some of them will look dumbfounded. Here we go again, is what they say. Do what you can. Be happy with what you do. I love that process of going unequipped to a new site and thinking that, okay, there are some things in here that I can. It is a part of my design ideology now. Like I said, I follow the material. They do not follow me.
It strikes me that part of the success of your projects is your kind of, it's an absolutely infectious enthusiasm for building, and I think a lot of that is, how do you get a classic supply chain behind you? And I think probably a lot of it is down to that kind of personality and that championing it. And I think maybe that's what's missing a lot in this kind of world of architecture.
Today, people are just thinking a lot of things. Sir, they are always talking about the poor and everything. But none of them have been poor. I have been poor. I know how it is. And it is not as bad as it seems, to be honest. It's one of the most beautiful aspects of life to go through the thing. And the construction equally has to go through that. Some of the younger architects, my now job is to tell them to have a positive attitude, enjoy this thing, today morning, your workers are calling you and saying, Anna, there is no material inside. That is the best part of my day. The best part of the day is when you don't know how it progresses. You have some failure. So I'm doing something with containers, a hotel in Thoothukudi, because there are a lot of shipping containers in waste, but it is a very thermally bad material because like it absorbs the heat a lot. So we are applying mud on top of it, powder on top of it in a particular way. And for the last month and a half, I have been making samples, and the samples, like failed. That is beautiful, to be honest, because I'm not wasting anybody's time. I am going there and failing myself. So what did I gain in 20 years is that now I'm organized to fail better. Failure is a part of our job, and it's probably the best part of the job, because when you eventually succeed, these failures actually add to that magic. You are an innovator. What does your name say? You are an architect. You are not a draftsman. So that means you are supposed to innovate. Organize yourself so that your failure is not really known initially. It takes time, it takes years. So the first time I experiment wouldn't be the main idea. It would be something experimented on an end of the kitchen, a storeroom where a failure can be accepted.
So, Vinu, every single one of your projects has a poetic visual quality. What's the interplay between the design and the materials and the site? Where do you start when you approach a new project?
So when I approach a new project, the problem with the general way we are taught in architecture is for us to be very loud. Architects are loud always. So over the years, I have managed to be less loud and listen more to the site, to the material in some sense. Like this material can outperform me, and this material has a bigger potential. If I think that I already know the material, then I'm not going to discover that potential. Let it design is what I would say. Let the design come on its own.
How does that relate to the natural environment? Because in Kerala, you have such beautiful places, and I imagine you're often building in very sensitive places.
So I am trying to learn from the site. I'm trying to understand the energy that is happening at the site. I'm trying to understand the climate at the site, everything, because I am an idiot. That is what I know, because I am a modern human born in concrete jungle who doesn't really understand anything. So I'm trying to connect with that particular part of nature. I believed in existing weeds and growth and everything, because that allows the natural flora and fauna to settle in. So now my team is actually proficient, even if they are building large scale, of not destroying the existing, even small bushes and shrubs and all. And if a tree just grows in through my building and stuff like that, I am fine with it. I know how much it will expand, what kind of openings I should give so that, like it gets space, I get space, I get the advantage, I get the shade.
One of the things that's emerging in the UK at the minute is about regenerative design. It's about not just about maintaining the kind of current level of the state of the planet, but it's actually about improving it. And I suspect this is really what you're doing. Is that something that's a kind of conscious aspect? It's about improvement as much as it is about maintaining stability of the site.
So for me, everything is, as I said, cumulative. I was never thinking about regenerative architecture or anything like that. But when I was initially doing in my hometown, I was a subject of a lot of scrutiny, criticism when I was doing mud buildings and everything. There was a swamp on which I was supposed to build a house. It was for a family of 4 people. And I told that I will only build this particular house if you allow the swamp to survive. So they said, how will that survive? It has 2 snakes, two big cobras in there, and it is not something that we can allow. Our children will be running around. I said, I will do it in such a way that the swamp is protected, you are also protected. You don't have to be afraid of the snake in any way. And I did it. So the swamp was in pristine condition when we finished it. And we made it in such a way the swamp was engulfed by our building and nobody can get into the swamp, but the rain and sun will come into the swamp and the swamp is running on its own, no problem. Extremely sanitizing our environment is going to only hamper our development. We are just overcomplicating things again and like trying to destroy ourselves in the process. So while I do not know much about regenerative architecture, we are doing our own stuff and we do not believe. So this manicured plants means you have to put some pesticide and fertilizer. That would drive out butterflies, butterflies. If you take any butterfly in your hand, you will find a powdery substance on its wings. So they are extremely sensitive to any chemicals in the air and ammonia. So we kind of grow only local weeds and everything, and flowering plants which are in the locality and stuff like that.
Just a few more questions. Tell us a bit about what you have in the pipeline.
So there are some amazing museums which are going to happen, thankfully, with tire and mud, and a city which is going to happen with tire and mud near the Neom, in the Neom area, but not the line. The Sharjah pavilion, the temperature was much lesser, even in the blistering hot sun inside our pavilion. And people used to take break inside, even during work and all. They didn't demolish it even post the Triennale exhibition. So they found out that, like this is one way of using local materials and local waste to create a sustainable habitat without air conditioning much. So we are exploring to build around 3 million square feet of residential, commercial, shopping, apartments, all those things, hotels with this particular technique. So
with tires.
Yeah. Tire is like as we speak, around 500,000 must be dumped around the world. So in a day, our estimation is around 500,000 is dumped in a day.
It's amazing. I mean, it's a terrifying amount, but fantastic you found it.
So the advantage is the desert soil, which is generally considered unusable for construction, can be used for construction via the tire method.
How does that work?
Because, like how you said, I always wanted to go a bit into unstabilized architecture, like what Anna Heringer said. Our eventual aim is to go there. Tire, actually, what it helps is once you pack soil into the tire, it becomes very sturdy and robust. And then once you plaster the outside, bad properties gets camouflaged. That is the only way we can actually easily relieve the tire damage that is happening, tire pollution that is happening in the world, even after discarding tires. So that soil doesn't have to have cement in it. Whatever you're packing inside the tires, any type of soil can be used.
Fantastic.
I'll put some images in the show notes of your pavilion. Okay, one last question. What would you like to be doing in 10 years' time?
10 years time, I would like to do this only. I don't know anything else to do. I don't know what I will do. What else I would do. For me, this is what I love doing,
I think that's a real gift when you find that path, when you find that path in your life. And I really look forward to seeing what comes next. Thank you very, very much for this conversation. Really, it's really inspirational, and I want to see, bigger projects coming.
Yes. Thank you, Hattie. Thank you, Mr. Joel. Thank you so much.
Our next guest will be Nicolas Kuckelbergs of Brussels-based BC Materials. You can find the show notes for this episode at www.architectsjournal.co.uk/podcasts, where you can also catch up with all our previous episodes. If you're enjoying Climate Champions, please subscribe and do rate us on your favorite podcast platform. It helps people find us. Thanks.